When Marcus heard about the royal guard, he almost laughed out loud. He had seen these guards before during parades and ceremonies on television. They wore fancy uniforms with gold decorations and carried old-fashioned weapons. Marcus thought they looked more like actors in a movie than real fighters. Marcus believed the royal guards were just for show. He imagined they spent their days standing still like statues and marching in straight lines. He was sure they had never been in a real fight in their entire lives. Their job was probably just to look pretty and impress tourists who visited the palace. The more Marcus thought about it, the more confident he became. This would be his chance to show everyone the difference between real martial arts and fake ceremonial guards. He would demonstrate his powerful leg sweep and other techniques, while the guards would probably just wave their swords around slowly for the audience. Marcus told Mr. Tanaka he would definitely take the job. The payment was very good, and it would be great advertising for his gym. He started planning what moves he would show to the Japanese visitors. He wanted to pick his most impressive techniques that would make the crowd gasp with amazement. After hanging up the phone, Marcus called his assistant Jimmy to share the good news. Jimmy had been helping at the gym for 2 years and knew all about Marcus' fighting abilities. Marcus told Jimmy about the royal palace job and how he would be working with the ceremonial guards. Marcus and Jimmy spent the afternoon talking about how funny it would be to see the difference between real fighters and pretend soldiers. They joked about how the guards probably could not even do 10 push-ups without getting tired. Marcus bragged that he could probably defeat 3 or 4 guards at the same time without breaking a sweat. Marcus decided to spend extra time practicing his best moves for the palace demonstration. He wanted everything to be perfect, so he could impress the important Japanese visitors. He also wanted to show the royal guards what a real martial artist looked like in action. That evening, Marcus practiced his leg sweep 50 times until his legs were sore. He imagined himself at the palace surrounded by amazed spectators, while the ceremonial guards watched from the side feeling embarrassed about their lack of real fighting skills. Marcus went to sleep that night dreaming about his upcoming moment of glory at the royal palace. The next morning, Marcus woke up feeling excited and confident. He packed his martial arts uniform and his favorite training shoes into a black sports bag. He also brought along his tournament medals to show anyone who might be interested in his fighting achievements. Marcus looked at himself in the mirror one last time and smiled. Today would be the day everyone would see what a real fighter looked like. Jimmy drove Marcus to the royal palace in his old pickup truck. As they got closer to the palace, Marcus could see the golden roofs shining in the morning sunlight. The walls around the palace were tall and white with beautiful decorations carved into the stone. Marcus had never seen anything so grand and impressive in his entire life. But Marcus forced himself to stay focused on his mission. He was here to demonstrate martial arts, not to play tourist. He reminded himself that he was a professional fighter with important work to do. The beautiful palace was just a nice background for his fighting demonstration. At the main gate, 2 guards in traditional uniforms checked Marcus' identification and let him inside. Marcus walked through courtyards filled with colorful flowers and ancient statues. Everything looked like it came from a fairy tale book. Tourists were taking pictures everywhere, and Marcus felt proud that he was here for official business, not just sightseeing. A palace official led Marcus to a meeting room where he would be introduced to the royal guard captain. Marcus straightened his shoulders and prepared to meet the man he would be working with. He expected to see someone tall and impressive-looking like the guards in movies. When Captain Somkai Ratanakosin walked into the room, Marcus tried not to look surprised. The captain was much shorter than Marcus had expected. He stood only about 5 feet and 8 inches tall. His build was lean, and he looked more like a school teacher than a warrior. The captain wore a neat uniform with gold buttons, but he did not look intimidating at all. Captain Somkai spoke in a quiet voice that was barely louder than a whisper. He welcomed Marcus to the palace and thanked him for coming to help with the demonstration. The captain explained that they would be performing for Japanese diplomats who were very interested in both modern and traditional martial arts. Marcus shook hands with Captain Somkai and noticed that the captain's hands were soft and smooth. There were no calluses or scars that Marcus would expect to see on the hands of a real fighter. Marcus' own hands were rough and hard from years of punching heavy bags and breaking wooden boards. The captain seemed very polite and respectful, but Marcus could tell he was not a serious fighter. Captain Somkai asked Marcus about his training background and listened carefully to the answers. But Marcus noticed that the captain never talked about his own fighting experience or training methods. During their conversation, Marcus kept thinking about how different this captain was from what he had imagined. The royal guards he had seen on television during ceremonies looked more impressive than this quiet man. Marcus wondered if Captain Somkai was actually just an administrator who organized events rather than a real guard. Captain Somkai explained the schedule for the afternoon demonstration. First, Marcus would perform some of his martial arts techniques for the audience. Then the captain would show some traditional Thai combat methods. Finally, they would do a friendly sparring match to show the differences between modern and ancient fighting styles. When the captain mentioned sparring, Marcus felt a little worried about accidentally hurting this small, polite man. Marcus was much bigger and stronger than Captain Somkai. Marcus had fought against many tough opponents in tournaments, but he had never sparred with someone who seemed so fragile and inexperienced. Marcus decided he would need to be very gentle during the sparring session. He would use slow movements and light contact, so he would not injure the captain in front of the important Japanese visitors. Marcus thought it would be embarrassing for everyone if he knocked out a royal guard during a cultural demonstration. The captain showed Marcus around the palace courtyard where the demonstration would take place. The area was covered with smooth marble tiles and surrounded by tall columns. Marcus imagined how impressive his techniques would look in this beautiful setting. He started practicing some of his moves while the captain watched quietly from the side. Marcus noticed that Captain Somkai observed his movements very carefully. The captain's eyes seemed to follow every kick and punch that Marcus practiced. But Marcus assumed the captain was just trying to learn some modern fighting techniques by watching him train. As the morning went on, Marcus became more convinced that this demonstration would be easy and successful. He would impress the Japanese diplomats with his powerful martial arts, while the captain would probably just demonstrate some slow traditional forms that looked more like dancing than fighting. Marcus spent his lunch break planning exactly which techniques he would use to make the biggest impression on the audience. He decided to save his famous leg sweep for the sparring session with Captain Somkai. That move would be the perfect way to end the demonstration and show everyone the difference between real martial arts and ceremonial palace traditions. By the time the afternoon arrived, Marcus felt completely confident and ready to put on the best martial arts show the royal palace had ever seen. The afternoon sun was shining brightly when the Japanese diplomats arrived at the palace courtyard. Marcus watched from behind a marble column as the important visitors took their seats on chairs covered with beautiful silk cushions. There were about 15 people in the audience, including some Thai officials and palace staff members. Marcus felt his heart beating faster with excitement. This was his big moment to show everyone what real martial arts looked like. He had performed in tournaments before, but never in such a grand location with such important people watching. The marble courtyard looked like a perfect stage for his demonstration. A palace announcer introduced Marcus to the audience as a skilled martial artist from Bangkok. Marcus walked out into the center of the courtyard and bowed respectfully to the Japanese visitors. He could see they were all paying close attention and seemed very interested in what he was about to show them. Marcus began his demonstration with some basic kicks and punches to warm up. Then he moved on to more advanced techniques that he had learned over his 8 years of training. He performed spinning kicks that made his legs look like helicopter blades cutting through the air. The audience watched with amazed expressions on their faces. Next, Marcus demonstrated his board-breaking skills. Palace staff had prepared several wooden boards for him to break with his bare hands and feet. Marcus focused his energy and struck each board with perfect technique. The sound of breaking wood echoed through the courtyard as the boards split in half. The Japanese diplomats clapped their hands and nodded their heads in approval. Marcus felt fantastic as he completed his solo performance. Everything had gone exactly as he had planned. The audience seemed impressed with his skills, and he could see some people taking photos with their cameras. Marcus bowed again and stepped to the side while Captain Somkai prepared for his demonstration. The captain walked slowly into the center of the courtyard carrying a long wooden staff. Marcus expected to see some slow traditional movements that would look more like a dance than real fighting. But as Captain Somkai began to move, Marcus noticed something strange about his techniques. The captain moved the wooden staff through the air in patterns that seemed to flow like water. His movements were smooth and graceful, but there was something powerful hidden underneath the gentle appearance. Marcus watched more carefully and realized that the captain techniques were actually very complex and precise. Captain Somkai demonstrated several traditional Thai fighting forms using different weapons including swords and spears. Each movement seemed to have a specific purpose, even though Marcus could not understand what the purposes were. The Japanese visitors watched with great interest and seemed to appreciate the historical significance of what they were seeing. When Captain Somkai finished his demonstration, the audience applauded politely. Marcus clapped along, but he still believed that his modern martial arts were much more practical and effective than these old-fashioned traditional forms. Now came the moment Marcus had been waiting for all day. The announcer explained that Marcus and Captain Somkai would demonstrate the differences between modern and traditional fighting styles through a friendly sparring match. Marcus stepped forward feeling confident and ready to show his superiority. Captain Somkai removed his formal jacket and stood in the center of the courtyard wearing only his white uniform shirt and dark pants. Marcus noticed that the captain looked even smaller without his decorative jacket. Marcus felt a little guilty about what he was about to do to this polite man in front of all these important people. The two fighters began to circle each other slowly. Marcus kept his hands up in a modern fighting stance, while Captain Somkai held his arms in a more relaxed position. Marcus thought the captain looked unprepared and vulnerable. Marcus had planned to take it easy during the sparring session, but something felt different as they moved around each other. Captain Somkai's eyes were focused and alert in a way that Marcus had not noticed before. The captain seemed to be studying Marcus' movements very carefully. For the first minute, they just circled and threw a few light punches and kicks. Marcus was being careful not to hurt the captain, but he was also looking for the perfect opportunity to use his famous leg sweep technique. He wanted to end this demonstration with his signature move that would leave no doubt about who was the better fighter. Marcus decided the time was right to make his move. He had seen Captain Somkai movement patterns and noticed that the captain sometimes stood with most of his weight on one foot. This would be the perfect moment to sweep that supporting leg and gently put the captain on the ground. Marcus feinted to the left to distract Captain Somkai's attention. Then he quickly dropped into his low fighting stance and prepared to execute the leg sweep that had won him 3 tournament championships. This was the moment Marcus had been dreaming about since he first heard about this demonstration. Marcus swept his right leg in a perfect arc toward Captain Somkai's ankles. The technique was flawless, and Marcus felt the familiar satisfaction of a move executed with perfect timing and precision. He was already imagining the impressed faces of the Japanese diplomats as they watched him demonstrate the effectiveness of modern martial arts. But something was wrong. Instead of falling to the marble floor, Captain Somkai seemed to move with Marcus' leg sweep rather than against it. Marcus felt confused as he watched the captain react in a way that no opponent had ever reacted before. Marcus felt his leg connect perfectly with Captain Somkai's ankles just as he had planned. For one wonderful second, everything seemed to go exactly right. Marcus could feel his leg sweep hitting its target with the same precision that had won him 3 tournament championships. This was the move that never failed to knock down his opponents. But then something impossible started to happen. Instead of crashing down onto the marble floor, Captain Somkai began to move in a way that Marcus had never seen before in his 8 years of fighting. The captain seemed to flow with the sweep, like he was dancing with Marcus' attack, instead of fighting against it. Marcus watched in complete shock as Captain Somkai used the momentum from the leg sweep to spin gracefully through the air. The captain looked like he was floating as he turned his body in a perfect circle above the ground. Marcus had never seen anyone react to his leg sweep technique in this way before. While Marcus was still trying to understand what was happening, Captain Somkai's hands moved faster than Marcus' eyes could follow. In one smooth motion that seemed to take no effort at all, the captain reached down and grabbed Marcus' extended leg. Marcus suddenly realized he was in serious trouble. Captain Somkai pivoted on his one remaining foot that was still touching the ground. He used Marcus' own leg as a handle to control his entire body. Marcus felt completely helpless as the captain twisted and turned him through the air like he weighed nothing at all. The technique Captain Somkai was using seemed to come from a completely different world of martial arts. Marcus had studied many different fighting styles, but he had never seen anything like this before. The captain was using Marcus' own strength and momentum against him in ways that seemed impossible. Marcus found himself spinning through the air with no control over his body. The beautiful palace courtyard became a blur of gold and white as he tumbled helplessly above the marble floor. He could hear gasps of surprise from the Japanese diplomats, but their voices sounded far away and strange. Time seemed to slow down as Marcus realized he was about to hit the ground very hard. He tried to prepare for the impact, but there was nothing he could do to protect himself. His perfect leg sweep had somehow turned into his own defeat in just a few seconds. Marcus crashed onto the marble floor with a loud thud that echoed through the courtyard. The impact knocked all the air out of his lungs and made his whole body ache with pain. He lay flat on his back, staring up at the blue sky, while trying to catch his breath and understand what had just happened to him. Meanwhile, Captain Somkai landed softly on his feet right beside Marcus as if nothing unusual had occurred. The captain looked completely calm and relaxed, like he had just finished a gentle morning walk, instead of an incredible fighting technique that had left Marcus lying helpless on the ground. The Japanese diplomats burst into amazed applause that was much louder and more enthusiastic than anything Marcus had received during his own demonstration. The visitors were clearly impressed by what they had just witnessed. Some of them were pointing and talking excitedly to each other in Japanese. Marcus tried to sit up, but his body felt weak and confused. His mind was racing as he attempted to figure out how his unbeatable leg sweep had been turned against him so easily. This was supposed to be the moment of his greatest triumph, but instead he was lying on the floor feeling completely humiliated. Captain Somkai knelt down beside Marcus with a concerned expression on his face. The captain asked if Marcus was hurt and offered to help him stand up. There was genuine worry in the captain's voice, and no sign of pride or satisfaction about what had just happened. Marcus looked up at Captain Somkai and saw kindness in the captain's eyes instead of the mockery he expected. This made Marcus feel even more confused about everything that had just occurred. How could someone who had just defeated him so completely be showing such genuine concern for his well-being? The audience continued their enthusiastic clapping, while Marcus slowly got back to his feet with Captain Somkai's help. Marcus felt dizzy and embarrassed as he stood before the impressed Japanese visitors. His perfect demonstration had turned into a complete disaster in just a few seconds. Marcus looked around the courtyard and saw that everyone was staring at him with expressions of amazement and curiosity. But they were not amazed by his martial arts skills like he had planned. Instead, they were amazed by the incredible technique that Captain Somkai had used to defeat him so easily. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Chen felt like he knew nothing about martial arts at all. Everything he had believed about fighting and his own abilities had been proven wrong in front of an audience of important people. His 8 years of training suddenly seemed worthless compared to whatever Captain Somkai had just demonstrated. Marcus realized that his assumptions about the royal guards had been completely wrong. Captain Somkai was not a ceremonial soldier who stood around looking pretty for tourists. He was a real warrior with skills that Marcus could not even begin to understand or explain. Captain Somkai helped Marcus stand up slowly and checked to make sure he was not seriously injured. The captain looked at Marcus' arms and legs and asked if anything felt broken or badly hurt. Marcus was surprised by how genuinely worried the captain seemed about his condition after what had just happened. Marcus expected Captain Somkai to smile with pride or make jokes about defeating him so easily. That is what most fighters would do after winning such an impressive victory in front of an important audience. But instead, the captain treated Marcus with the same respect and kindness he had shown before the sparring match. The Japanese diplomats were still clapping and talking excitedly among themselves. Marcus could hear them using words like amazing and incredible as they discussed what they had just witnessed. But all their praise was directed toward Captain Somkai technique, not toward Marcus' fighting skills. Marcus felt his face turning red with embarrassment as he realized how badly he had been defeated. His ego was hurt much more than his body, even though he was still sore from hitting the marble floor. Marcus had never experienced such a complete and public failure in all of his years of martial arts training. Captain Somkai spoke quietly to Marcus and suggested they continue the demonstration with some different techniques. The captain wanted to give Marcus a chance to recover his dignity in front of the audience. This act of kindness made Marcus feel even more ashamed of his earlier arrogant attitude. Marcus nodded and tried to focus on continuing the demonstration professionally. He did not want to run away like a scared child, even though that is exactly what he felt like doing. Marcus forced himself to stay and finish the job he had been hired to do. For the next hour, Marcus watched in growing amazement as Captain Somkai demonstrated more fighting skills that seemed to come from a different world. The captain showed techniques that used an opponent's strength against them in ways that looked like magic tricks. Every movement flowed smoothly into the next like water running down a hillside. Captain Somkai demonstrated how to redirect punches so that attackers would hit themselves instead of their targets. He showed how to use tiny movements to send much larger opponents flying through the air. The captain made everything look effortless, even though Marcus could tell the techniques were incredibly complex and difficult. The Japanese visitors asked Captain Somkai many questions about his training and the history of his fighting methods. The captain answered politely, but Marcus noticed he never bragged about his abilities or tried to make himself sound more important than he was. This humble attitude was completely different from Marcus' own behavior. When the formal demonstration ended, the Japanese diplomats thanked both Marcus and Captain Somkai for the educational experience. Several visitors came up to Marcus and complimented him on his modern martial arts techniques. But Marcus could tell they were just being polite because their real interest was clearly in Captain Somkai traditional methods. Marcus gathered his equipment and prepared to leave the palace feeling defeated and confused. He had come here expecting to impress everyone with his superior fighting skills. Instead, he had learned that there were martial artists in the world who were far more skilled than he had ever imagined possible. Captain Somkai approached Marcus as he was packing his bag. The captain asked if Marcus would like to join him for tea before leaving the palace. Marcus was surprised by this invitation, since he assumed the captain would want to celebrate his victory with the other palace guards instead. Marcus accepted the invitation because he was curious about Captain Somkai and wanted to understand more about what had happened during their sparring match. They walked together through the palace gardens toward the guards' private quarters. Marcus felt awkward walking beside someone who had just embarrassed him so completely. The guards' quarters were much simpler than the fancy palace rooms Marcus had seen earlier. Captain Somkai led him to a small room with plain wooden furniture and a window that looked out over a peaceful garden. The captain prepared green tea using a traditional tea set and offered Marcus some sweet cookies. As they sat drinking tea, Captain Somkai began to talk about martial arts in a way that Marcus had never heard before. The captain explained that tournament fighting and real combat were completely different types of skills that required different approaches and mindsets. Captain Somkai told Marcus that he had watched videos of his tournament fights online and genuinely respected his dedication to martial arts training. But the captain gently explained that fighting in controlled competitions with rules and referees was very different from the kind of fighting that palace guards needed to master. Marcus listened carefully as Captain Somkai described the responsibilities of protecting important people in dangerous situations. The captain explained that palace guards could not rely on strength and aggression alone. They needed to use techniques that would stop threats quickly and quietly without causing unnecessary attention or harm. For the first time, Marcus began to understand that there might be aspects of martial arts that he had never considered or learned about in his 8 years of training. Marcus sipped his green tea slowly and tried to process everything that Captain Somkai was telling him. The small room felt peaceful and quiet compared to the excitement and embarrassment of the demonstration. Marcus found himself relaxing for the first time since arriving at the palace that morning. Captain Somkai continued explaining the differences between sport fighting and protection work. He told Marcus that tournament fighters learn to defeat opponents quickly and impressively to win points and prizes, but palace guards learn to neutralize threats while keeping their protected persons safe and unharmed. Marcus had never thought about martial arts from this perspective before. All his training had focused on winning competitions and looking impressive in front of audiences. The idea of fighting to protect someone else instead of defeating opponents was completely new to him. The captain asked Marcus about his goals and dreams in martial arts. Marcus admitted that he had always wanted to become famous as a fighter and maybe open a chain of martial arts schools across Thailand. He had imagined himself on television teaching celebrities and becoming wealthy from his fighting skills. Captain Somkai listened without judgment as Marcus talked about his ambitions. Then the captain shared his own story about how he had started training as a young boy. The captain explained that he had never wanted fame or money from martial arts. His only goal had been to serve his country by protecting important people. Marcus learned that Captain Somkai had been training since he was 8 years old in an ancient Thai martial art called Krabi Krabong. This fighting system combined weapons training with empty hand techniques in ways that Marcus had never seen before. The captain had learned from masters who had been palace guards themselves for many generations. The captain explained that his teachers had been men who protected kings during times when assassination attempts were common and deadly serious. Their techniques had been developed not for show or sport, but for real life and death situations, where failure meant the death of the people they were sworn to protect. Marcus began to understand why Captain Somkai techniques had seemed so different from anything he had learned in tournaments. The captain fighting methods came from a tradition that was hundreds of years old and had been tested in actual combat situations throughout history. Captain Somkai offered to show Marcus some basic techniques if he was interested in learning. Marcus felt excited but also nervous about this opportunity. He was curious to learn more about these mysterious fighting methods, but he was also afraid of being embarrassed again. The captain led Marcus to a small training area behind the guards' quarters. The space was simple with wooden floors and mirrors on the walls. There were no fancy equipment or modern training tools like Marcus was used to seeing in gyms. Everything looked old but well maintained. Captain Somkai began by showing Marcus some basic stances and movements. The captain explained that traditional Thai martial arts focused on balance and flow rather than strength and speed. Marcus tried to copy the movements but found them much harder than they looked. Marcus discovered that his muscles were trained for explosive power and quick movements, but the traditional techniques required a different kind of control that felt awkward and unnatural to him. Every time Marcus tried to use his usual strength and speed, the movements fell apart. Captain Somkai patiently corrected Marcus' posture and breathing. The captain explained that traditional martial arts required the mind and body to work together in harmony. Marcus realized that all his tournament training had focused on his body, but had never taught him to use his mind properly during fighting. For 2 hours, Marcus struggled with movements that looked simple when Captain Somkai demonstrated them. The captain could flow from one technique to another like he was dancing, but when Marcus tried the same movements, he felt clumsy and off balance. Marcus began to appreciate how much skill and practice were required to master these traditional techniques. He realized that Captain Somkai had probably spent decades perfecting movements that Marcus could barely perform once correctly. As the afternoon training session ended, Captain Somkai told Marcus that he was welcome to return and learn more if he was serious about studying traditional martial arts. The captain explained that this kind of training required patience and humility because the techniques could not be learned quickly or easily. Marcus thanked Captain Somkai for his time and kindness. As he prepared to leave the palace, Marcus felt different than when he had arrived that morning. His confidence had been shattered, but something new was beginning to grow in its place. Marcus felt curious and eager to learn more about martial arts traditions he had never known existed. On the drive back to Bangkok, Marcus thought about everything that had happened. He realized that his 8 years of training had only taught him one small part of what martial arts could be. There was a whole world of knowledge and skill that he had never even imagined before meeting Captain Somkai. 3 days later, Marcus returned to the royal palace, feeling both excited and nervous. He had spent those 3 days thinking constantly about his experience with Captain Somkai and the incredible techniques he had witnessed. Marcus could not stop wondering about the fighting methods that had defeated him so easily. Captain Somkai welcomed Marcus back with a warm smile and led him through parts of the palace that regular visitors never got to see. They walked down stone corridors lined with ancient paintings and statues of past kings and warriors. Marcus felt like he was traveling back in time as they moved deeper into the historic building. The captain stopped in front of a heavy wooden door that looked very old and worn. Captain Somkai produced an ornate key from his pocket and unlocked the door with a satisfying click. As the door swung open, Marcus gasped at what he saw inside. The room was like a secret training hall that had been hidden beneath the palace for hundreds of years. The walls were made of old stone blocks, and the ceiling was supported by thick wooden beams. Torches and metal holders provided flickering light that made shadows dance across the ancient surfaces. Traditional Thai weapons hung on every wall in perfect rows. Marcus saw swords with curved blade spears with decorated points and staffs, made from dark hardwood. There were also weapons he did not recognize that looked like they came from a museum about ancient warfare. Captain Somkai explained that this training room had been used by royal guards for over 200 years. Every man who had ever protected the Thai royal family had learned to fight in this very space. The weapons on the walls had belonged to guards who had served kings and queens throughout Thai history. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the history and tradition surrounding him. His own martial arts gym suddenly seemed very new and unimportant compared to this ancient training ground. Marcus realized he was standing in a place where real warriors had prepared for life and death battles. Captain Somkai selected 2 wooden training swords from the wall and handed one to Marcus. The captain explained that they would start with basic sword techniques that formed the foundation of traditional Thai martial arts. Marcus held the wooden sword and was surprised by how perfectly balanced it felt in his hands. The captain began teaching Marcus the fundamental principles behind traditional fighting methods. Captain Somkai explained that these techniques were not based on strength or speed like modern martial arts. Instead, they relied on understanding leverage timing and the natural movements of the human body. Marcus learned that every technique was designed to use an attacker momentum against them. When someone pushed, you learned to pull. When someone pulled, you learned to push. The goal was to never fight directly against an opponent force, but to redirect that force in ways that would defeat them. Captain Somkai demonstrated how to find the balance points in the human body. He showed Marcus specific spots where even a small amount of pressure applied at the right angle could send a much larger person tumbling to the ground. These pressure points had been discovered and perfected over many generations of palace guards. Marcus tried to practice these techniques, but found them incredibly difficult to master. His tournament training had taught him to use his own strength and speed to overpower opponents. But these traditional methods required him to be patient and wait for exactly the right moment to apply each technique. The captain explained that palace guards needed to be able to protect important people in crowded spaces without causing panic or attracting attention. Their techniques had to be subtle and precise rather than dramatic and obvious. A guard might need to stop an assassin without anyone else in the room even noticing what had happened. Marcus spent hours trying to understand the physics behind these ancient fighting methods. Captain Somkai showed him how small circular movements could generate tremendous power. He demonstrated how proper breathing could increase strength and how mental focus could improve timing and accuracy. Every technique seemed to have layers of complexity that Marcus had never encountered before. What looked like a simple block or strike actually involved precise footwork, coordinated breathing, and perfect timing. Marcus began to understand why it took decades to master these traditional methods. Captain Somkai told Marcus stories about famous palace guards from history who had used these techniques to save the lives of kings and queens. The captain described battles where outnumbered guards had defeated groups of armed attackers using nothing but the skills they had learned in this very room. Marcus realized that he was learning fighting methods that had been tested in real combat throughout history. These were not techniques created for tournaments or demonstrations. They were survival skills that had kept people alive during the most dangerous situations imaginable. As the training session ended, Marcus felt both exhausted and inspired. His muscles ached from practicing unfamiliar movements, but his mind was excited by everything he had learned. Marcus knew that he had only scratched the surface of these ancient martial arts traditions. Captain Somkai offered to continue teaching Marcus if he was willing to commit to serious long-term training. The captain warned that mastering traditional Thai martial arts required years of patient practice and complete dedication. There were no shortcuts or quick solutions in this type of learning. Marcus made a decision that would change the rest of his life. He told Captain Somkai that he wanted to learn everything possible about traditional Thai martial arts. Marcus was ready to commit years of his life to understanding the ancient fighting methods that had humbled him so completely. Captain Somkai accepted Marcus as a student, but warned him that the training would be more difficult than anything he had experienced before. The captain explained that Marcus would need to forget many things he had learned in tournaments and start over with a completely different approach to martial arts. Marcus began visiting the palace every week for training sessions with Captain Somkai and other senior guards. At first, the other guards were suspicious of this outsider who wanted to learn their secret techniques. But gradually they began to accept Marcus as he showed genuine respect and dedication to their traditions. The training was incredibly challenging both physically and mentally. Marcus had to unlearn habits that had made him successful in tournaments, but would be dangerous in real combat situations. He discovered that many techniques he thought were effective were actually flawed and could get him seriously hurt against a skilled opponent. Marcus learned that his modern martial arts background actually helped him understand the traditional techniques faster than complete beginners. His body was already strong and flexible from years of training. His mind was disciplined and focused from tournament competition. These advantages allowed him to progress more quickly than Captain Somkai had expected. But Marcus also had to overcome bad habits that were deeply ingrained from his tournament fighting. He had learned to rely on strength and aggression to defeat opponents. The traditional methods required patience, subtlety, and perfect timing instead. Marcus found it very difficult to change his natural fighting instincts. The guards taught Marcus about situational awareness and how to read dangerous situations before violence actually began. They showed him how to position himself in crowded rooms to have the best angles for protecting important people. Marcus learned techniques for fighting in confined spaces where there was no room for big movements. Marcus discovered that protecting other people required completely different skills than defeating opponents in fair fights. A bodyguard might need to shield someone from attack while fighting multiple enemies at the same time. The guards taught Marcus techniques for using his own body as a human shield while still being able to fight effectively. Captain Somkai introduced Marcus to the mental discipline required for protection work. Guards needed to stay alert and focused for hours at a time while appearing relaxed and normal. They had to be ready to react instantly to threats while remaining invisible to the people they were protecting. Marcus learned about the rigorous selection process for becoming a royal guard. Candidates were tested not just for fighting ability, but for character loyalty and mental stability. The palace could not risk having guards who might be corrupted, bribed, or who might panic under pressure. The guards shared stories about their training experiences and the sacrifices they had made to serve their country. Many of them had given up opportunities for wealth and fame to dedicate their lives to protecting others. Marcus began to understand that being a palace guard was more like being a monk than being a regular soldier. Marcus started applying these lessons to his own martial arts school in Bangkok. He began teaching his students about respect, patience, and the responsibility that comes with knowing how to fight. Marcus explained that martial arts should be used to protect people, not to hurt them unnecessarily. His students noticed immediate changes in Marcus' teaching style and personality. He was calmer, more thoughtful, and somehow more dangerous despite being less aggressive than before. Marcus stopped bragging about his tournament victories and started focusing on helping his students develop character along with fighting skills. Marcus began offering special classes on traditional Thai martial arts for his most advanced students. He always gave credit to Captain Somkai and the Royal Guards for everything he taught. Marcus made sure his students understood that these techniques came from a tradition much older and more important than modern tournament fighting. The captain occasionally visited Marcus' gym to help with these special classes. The students were amazed by Captain Somkai's skills and grateful for the opportunity to learn from a real palace guard. These visits helped Marcus' students understand the serious responsibility that came with learning traditional fighting methods. Marcus' relationship with Captain Somkai grew from teacher and student to close friends who shared a deep love for martial arts. They would spend hours discussing the philosophy behind different techniques and the history of various fighting traditions. Marcus felt like he had found a mentor who understood his passion for learning and growing as a martial artist. Marcus began to realize that true martial arts mastery was not about defeating other people, but about understanding yourself and your place in the world. The most important lessons he learned had nothing to do with fighting techniques and everything to do with becoming a better person. 6 months had passed since Marcus first stepped into the royal palace thinking he would teach ceremonial guards about real fighting. Now he stood in his own gym in Bangkok, but everything about him had changed completely. His students could see the transformation in the way he moved, spoke, and taught martial arts. Marcus still competed in tournaments, but his approach to fighting had become something entirely different. He won matches more easily than before, but he no longer needed to prove his superiority over other fighters. His techniques had become more efficient and precise, while requiring less effort and energy than his old methods. Marcus incorporated traditional Thai techniques into his tournament fighting in ways that confused and amazed his opponents. He could redirect their attacks, use their strength against them, and defeat them with movements that looked almost effortless. Other fighters began asking Marcus to teach them his new methods. Marcus began offering seminars around Thailand on integrating modern and traditional martial arts. He always started these seminars by telling the story of his humbling experience at the royal palace. Marcus wanted other fighters to understand that true mastery required humility and respect for all martial arts traditions. These seminars became very popular because Marcus could explain complex traditional techniques in ways that modern fighters could understand and apply. He had the unique ability to bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and contemporary training methods. Students traveled from other countries to learn from Marcus. Captain Somkai remained Marcus' closest friend and most important teacher. The captain visited Marcus' gym regularly to help with advanced classes and to continue Marcus' own training. Their friendship had grown into a partnership where they learned from each other and shared their knowledge with dedicated students. Marcus learned that Captain Somkai had been watching videos of his tournament fights for years before they met. The captain had recognized Marcus' potential as a martial artist, but had also seen his need for humility and deeper understanding. Their meeting at the palace had not been a coincidence, but had been carefully arranged by people who wanted to help Marcus grow. The secret training room beneath the royal palace became like a second home to Marcus. He spent countless hours there practicing traditional techniques and learning about the history of Thai martial arts. The other guards began treating Marcus like a brother who had earned his place among them through dedication and respect. Marcus' teaching style at his own gym had completely transformed. He no longer focused only on winning competitions, but emphasized character development, discipline, and the responsibility that came with martial arts knowledge. His students became better people as well as better fighters. Marcus started a special program for young people from poor neighborhoods who could not afford regular martial arts classes. He taught them not just fighting techniques but life skills like discipline, respect, and self-confidence. Many of these students went on to become successful in school and their careers because of what they learned from Marcus. The reputation of Marcus Gym spread throughout Southeast Asia as a place where students could learn both effective fighting techniques and important life lessons. Marcus became known as a teacher who cared more about developing good people than creating tournament champions. Marcus often reflected on how his life had changed since that embarrassing day at the royal palace. He realized that getting knocked down by Captain Somkai had been the best thing that ever happened to him as a martial artist. That moment of defeat had opened his mind to possibilities he never knew existed. Marcus continued to perfect his famous leg sweep technique, but now he understood it as just one small part of a much larger system of knowledge and wisdom. The technique became even more effective because Marcus had learned to use it with proper timing, patience, and understanding of his opponent. Marcus frequently told his students about the importance of staying humble and open to learning from unexpected teachers. He explained that real martial arts masters could be found anywhere and that wisdom often came from the most unlikely sources. Marcus had learned that true strength came from admitting weakness, and true victory came from accepting defeat. The young man who had once bragged about his tournament victories and looked down on ceremonial guards had become a respected teacher who understood that martial arts was about serving others and protecting those who could not protect themselves. Marcus had discovered that the most important battles were fought not against other people, but against his own ego and limitations. Marcus Chen had finally learned what it meant to be a true martial artist.